The opinions you hear on Your Mountain from individual hosts or guests do not necessarily represent those of Your Mountain, our sponsors, or other entities we're affiliated with professionally or otherwise. You've waited long enough. Go listen to the show.
There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is Your Mountain.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of the Your Mountain podcast. I'm your host, David Wilms. I'm going to pause. Co-host, Nephi Cole, who now just as a matter of course, takes a big swaggle of something right
it's
before the
rock
introduction.
star recovery because, let's be honest, Dave, it's been a long few days. Brother needs some vitamins with his energy drinks right now because, late nights following shenanigans on Capitol Hill. There's a lot going on.
There is a lot going on. And I'm sure people are starting to be like, are they just doing another episode on public land sell-off and reconciliation? And like, yeah,
you love it. That's what you come here for.
Yeah, I know it's like 3 in a row on the same thing,
yeah.
But you know what? Well, I think people really care about this. And I think it's worth talking about. And then hopefully here in coming episodes, we're going to talk about more site-specific local hunting, angling related stuff that you come here for as well. But we also want to talk in real time about the real issues that are happening that people are caring about. And you'd be hard pressed right now to find something that the hunting community cares more about, in my opinion, than the threat of selling off hundreds of thousands of acres of public land in Nevada and Utah, which is what we talked about in the past. And I mean, let me frame this because I don't want to be a hyperbolic type. I want to make sure I'm careful here.
This is going to be entertaining. I can't wait for what you have to say.
What I'm about to say. So, reminder.
Oh, go
I
ahead.
just want to do a reminder of the acreage we're talking about.
I was just going to ask you, Dave. I was going to say, is it hundreds of thousands of acres, Dave, or is it millions of acres?
Oh, we're getting to
or
get
is it
to that
10,000
in just a
acres, or is it?
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a minute, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting.
Do you know?
Let's start with it right now. Remember when this amendment was introduced?
Remember when we started talking about this and we're like, I don't know, it's 11,000 acres. That seems like a lot. Let's do the math. And then it was 500,000 acres. And
but then there was in between that, there was like, maybe it's 350,000 acres. But remember when the bill was first introduced, not the bill, the amendment to the bill was first introduced at something like 11:40 p.m., blindsiding everybody.
Let's just say it was late at night.
It was very late at night. Introduced. And at that time, it's not a lot of acres. It's about 11,000 acres. Right? I think that was the public statement. It's about 11,000 acres. And it's really just in and around communities, and it's, kind of degraded land to begin with, and, for some housing and for infrastructure. And then you come to find out that it's like, no, that 11,000 was also included more like another 350,000 acres in Nevada in checkerboard that was slated for either sale or exchange. I know there were a lot of discussion around land swaps, but it also, the way the language was written in the amendment that wound up in the bill was sale or exchange. And so you start saying 350, and then people started doing some mapping on it and said, no, it's actually closer to 500,000 acres that are at stake for being sold or transferred or exchanged. And I guess the point I'd tried to make a couple of times in other settings is if you don't know, when you're introducing an amendment, if you don't know whether the acreage at stake is 11,000 acres or 500,000 acres, it's probably not ready for prime time.
I think that's good advice. I would say also on the opposite side, if you are in opposition to a proposal and you have no idea how many acres it is, you better not act like you know exactly how many it is. Be like, oh no, they're pulling the wool over your eyes. It's really some fantastically large number, and just don't be wrong on that.
What are you hinting at? I think you're
Well,
hinting at something here.
Dave, an interesting thing happened. I am a proud subscriber to an online mapping service, which
I am too.
And I use it all the time, and I think they're phenomenal. Yep, I have the same thing. Look at this. I've got this little.
Oh, we have the same card. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the thing that is great about this. Like, first of all, what disappoints me is that back when I worked for the USDA NRCS, as you know, Dave, I did mapping. And so I actually used to do, as a soil scientist, this is the beginning of my professional career. So it's a long time ago. I used to walk around with the GPS unit, and this is going to play into the podcast, I promise people. So just listen to the story. We used to walk around with a GPS unit that was the size of a football, and it was called the plugger. Did you ever use one of those big green things?
I did. I don't know if you know this about me. When I was a wildlife biologist for a while, I did remote sensing projects, and I carried one of those things around.
The
plugger. I had to map prairie dog colonies.
Oh, right? Yeah, and they were like, you got to use this because it's the most accurate because it's not being scrambled. Was the discussion?
You had to do weight training to carry that thing around.
Yeah, and you wait 20 minutes for it to lock onto the satellites to tell you what the coordinate was.
Then the batteries lasted about an hour.
Yeah, and then I showed up one summer. So I showed up. I just bought like a little tiny. I'm sure Magellan. I think was the first. Like I had this little, that was this smaller than my Rockstar energy drink, which was still at the time like we're like, oh my gosh, that's so big. But at the time, you're like, wow, that's really small. And I'm like, I'm just gonna use this. As we're out in the field, like, oh my goodness, you couldn't. And I was like, look, in 30 seconds, I know where I'm at versus the plugger, and like the numbers are almost the exact same for what we did. It didn't matter. But anyway, so that's just to say, like within 3 years of like working in that mapping stuff, I was using a Garmin, and we had maps. Like there was the GPS, the map 76, then had a map on your GPS unit. And so I was downloading parcel data, because I was a GIS and, that's what I did, GIS work. So I've got this GIS data layer of mapping, like who owns what, downloaded onto my map 76 so I can walk around when I'm hunting. So I'd take this thing, home, of course, and I'd use it during hunting season. I'm like, I can go anywhere now. Like I'm invincible. I now have all the land ownership. I know, like, right. And then, and that was all to myself. And I thought it was the greatest thing on earth. Some clown figured out how to put it on a chip and sold it to everyone else and made $1 bajillion. And that just goes to show you that I thought I was really smart and I was an idiot. I should have put it on a chip and sold it to everyone else rather than hoarding it for myself. Let that be a lesson to everyone. So I digress. But anyway, this company, somebody decided it was a great idea to do an analysis of the proposal. They just did it wrong. They got the numbers wrong. And so they rolled out this statement that a whole bunch of people relied on, and all of you put on your time feeds and sent to everybody else. And, they were off by 1 million acres.
Look, we're beating around the bush. I'm just going to say, it was Onyx, right? It was. And we all use it. Onyx is a great tool, and they're a very reputable company, and
we
they're
love
very,
you guys.
very good at what they do.
So
very good at what they do.
Don't cancel my membership.
They came in on the day that reconciliation was going to be voted on. So we're recording this podcast on the 22nd of May, like really hours after the House of Representatives voted on their reconciliation bill. But yesterday, on the 21st of May, in the morning, Onyx released this report and said, based on our analysis, this 500,000 acres that people are talking about that are subject to sale or exchange or transfer or just disposal generally in Nevada and Utah, that 500,000 acres is wrong. It's actually 1.5 million acres. And because they're such a reputable company, everybody jumped on that number. I jumped on that number, right? And people started pushing that out.
I have to admit, Dave, I was somewhat dubious because I wanted to see the receipts first.
I know. And I will say, I mean, I was sort of scratching my head, and I started making a few phone calls yesterday, and like, where did these numbers come from? I was kind of confused by it. I was like, man, has everybody else that's been analyzing this been this wrong? But man, 1.5 million. It was a huge number. We're talking about something 3/4 the size of Yellowstone National Park at that point, that could be on the chopping blocks. Well, as it turns out, and I don't know where the methodology error was in this, but they revised pretty quickly later in the day anyway, revised their number back down to 547,000 acres, away from that 1.5 million. Unfortunately, I think, some of the damage could have been done because you had a lot of big media companies that pushed that number out. And I imagine that number also got into the hands of members of Congress and so forth, saying, don't sell off this 1.5 million acres. And, I guess, and I'm sure they feel terrible about this. It's just a good lesson because they are a reputable company, and they are what they do is incredibly important, not just for you and I being able to access lands, right? Being able to identify where boundaries are and make sure that we're in the right places and all that stuff. It's opened up so many opportunities. They do that kind of work is incredible. They've also done really important mapping that's helped from a policy standpoint, where, you want to identify where landlocked parcels of public lands are, things that you can't get to, right? Because there's no permanent legal access, or how many acres are in checkerboard, and how do we deal with access there, and that sort of stuff. They've been very important contributors and trusted contributors to this. And unfortunately, getting this number wrong at that moment in time, like as this bill is coming up for a vote, and as people are pushing so hard to have this public lands provision stripped out of it, the sales provision stripped out of it, having that information not be accurate, I'm hoping it doesn't have lasting effects. It could, like I said, on like a phenomenal company, and everybody makes mistakes. But I'm just wanting to reiterate, if you've been relying on that 1.5 million acre number, don't. That's not the number.
No, I think the thing that I worry about it is that once you go in, if people start using, like, depending on how hard they ran that number, what you have, the problem is this was used for lobbying purposes. This number went in and hit people, and people were hitting staff and hitting representatives with that number. And so here's the problem with that. If that number is wrong, your credibility takes a massive hit, because now you lied. Even if you didn't mean to, you went in because the vote happened, right? They took the vote. And so now it's really interesting because it does a couple things. One of them that it does is, like, first of all, if you use that number in an office, you're going to have to go in and apologize, tell them you used the wrong number. And then it just makes you look bad. You've got egg on your face if you used bad numbers in your lobbying effort. And so you're not trustworthy anymore. Now they have to double check your numbers every time you tell them something. It doesn't matter what the source was. So if you're a person that relied on that number, you used that number, it made you look bad. Now, whoever at that company that put out that 1.5 million, they probably didn't anticipate, they didn't know, like depending on who it is, they may not have realized that when they said that number was going to a congressman's ear. And so there may have been, they don't necessarily realize the importance of the accuracy of that number. Because if you're just trying to frame it up, and this is something that entities like BHA have been guilty of in the past. It's, you just take, the big picture, and you're like, hey, look at the big picture, and it's like, you speak in platitudes instead of exactness. And when you do that, like, you might not see the harm in that. But there's a problem with that, is when people start making decisions based on the platitudes, and then there is a specific, when you get down to the nitty gritty and a tight, real scientific exact assessment, you better be right in that. Because if you have been just, broadly spewing platitudes instead of being exact, and now it's time to be exact, and And if you're wrong, again, your credibility takes a hit. And so that's concern number one for me on this, is the data is like, it just makes you look bad. The other one that I think is really interesting is when you look at and I hope that we don't get lost in this as an outdoor community. Did you actually go look at the map?
Yeah, I pulled it up.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. And I would tell everybody to think about. Look at that map and then realize that this, believe it or not, this isn't over. And so you may think this is over, but it's not. And we'll talk more about that. But here's the thing. When I look at that map, and I specifically look at one state, the state of Utah, and you saw the areas in that state, if you think by looking at that map, you could be deceived into thinking that that's the only lands anybody cares about, like these. And I got to tell you straight up, those aren't the lands that people care about. So if you're talking about the lands that people want to transfer, like we may be looking at something in that map. If we're looking at that and that's giving you, I understand that maybe what we're talking about here, but conceptually speaking, if you're talking about the federal lands that people actually want to see transferred because they want them because they're valuable, did you notice where, for example, none of these lands are at? Well, there's none of them around, I don't know, Park City.
Yeah, but some of them are around Zion.
Yeah, but you look at those ones that are around that area, like you say they're around Zion, and they're like, they're not there's a few parcels that are big enough where you could actually do like developments, but most of them in Utah, it's like a road.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I know we've talked about this before, but there were some more significant parcels that were adjacent to Zion that actually, from my understanding, would be or would have been used to build potentially housing for
workers or
workers.
something.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about like land near Rockville. You're talking about, anyway, my concern is this, is if we get caught up in thinking that we're looking, that this picture is the picture, you might be like, well, it doesn't seem like a very big deal when you look at Utah, right? But if you look at Utah's, what's the percentage of federal land in Utah?
I want to say it's like 65%.
Do you think that this is what Mike Lee is talking about when he says, that he's talking about these parcels? I don't think so. Not. And so that's the danger, is like if you hone in on that, like that, if you're using broad numbers and platitudes and suddenly we say, no, this is exactly what it is, and you miss the boat on that and you're not right, like you hurt yourself twice. You hurt yourself once because you're not actually looking at necessarily what the end argument is going to be about, and you've undermined your credibility in using an inaccurate maps, inaccurate statements. You got to be very careful when you decide that, you're going to tell everybody exactly what it is, if it's not right. So anyway, that was a long discussion of that and probably didn't need to be that long, but man, let's not do that again.
But it matters. No, it matters. Like your credibility, it takes, that old statement, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and a minute to lose it.
In the lobbying world, so, and we are all, if you're listening to this podcast, you're working in that space. In the public influence world, that couldn't be more true. You're only as good as your integrity. And here's the caveat. We can all be wrong, and that's okay. It's okay to be wrong, but you better own it, immediately. And say like, because being able to do business in this public influencing space depends on recognizing when you like it depends on saying like, look, man, when I'm right, I'm going to give you the truth every time. I'm going to give you the truth. And if I find out that I was wrong, I'm going to come back immediately and let you know that I was wrong. And so it's just a critically important piece of trying to work in this influence space.
Yeah, and I will say they did correct their numbers, so they are now back more in line with that 500,000 acre number that's been out there now for a little while. So they did do that, and I will say this: I don't think that they're report had any bearing on the outcome. And we didn't even talk about the outcome. I'm just
No.
assuming everybody listening to this already knows the outcome. But the language was stripped from the reconciliation bill, the public land sale language. And I don't think it was stripped because of that last minute report. Like that, it was getting stripped because Representative Zinke from Montana was an absolute bulldog on this. So that's one thing. You had Representative Simpson from Idaho, who also said not on my watch, right? But Representative Zinke was like, he drew a line in the sand and said, I will not vote for this reconciliation bill if this language is in there. Full stop. And then he found 6 other Republican representatives to say, yep, I'm not going to do that either. Now, I'm not going to go through that name because I don't know how many of those reps want their names out there. But there were a number that went to Speaker Johnson and said, like, we can't support this. You got to pull it. And so that leadership was huge. And then I got to say this part, the hunting community did what the hunting community does when somebody comes and threatens the existence of public lands in places. And make no mistake, like even some of these parcels, like we've said, some of these parcels might be suitable for disposal. Maybe. Not all of them, but there's a process to go through, and the process was circumvented through this late night amendment. The process for how we go about disposing lands and how we reinvest the money from sale back into stewardship of public lands. Like that was all thrown out the window. And the hunting community said, really, if this bill passes, it just opens up the door for more things like this to happen. It really is a threat to public lands across the country, because other people in other places are going to say, oh, well, if Nevada and Utah got that, I want that too. And you'd start seeing pushes in it would just relax things. So the hunting community came unglued and stepped up in a big way, in the way that they do. And if you remember, we were talking about call your reps, lean in, and everybody's saying that. Like I saw so many calls to actions from different hunting organizations. You had Meat Eater doing it. You had BHA doing it. You had TRCP doing it. You had I saw Wild Sheep Foundation doing it. National Wild Turkey Federation was doing it. Congressional Sportsman's Foundation put out a statement saying, basically trust the process, as in the existing process. So you had huge call to action from the sporting community, and people stepped up in a big way. And I want to drive home this point because it's something we probably say, maybe, I don't know if it's too much, but remember, we're always saying, contact your representative, speak up, make your voice heard. It matters. And now we can point to this. We can point to this language coming out of the House Reconciliation Bill as a proof point that your voice does matter. Like, you were heard. Tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people calling in and saying, don't do this. And it was such a big deal that you have somebody like Representative Zinke saying, yeah, I think his quote was, "This is my San Juan Hill." Like, this is right. Like it's a big deal, and it's the sporting community, the hunters and anglers of this country stepping up, sportsmen stepping up and saying, "Not on my watch." So a huge props to every single one of you that called, sent an email, sent a text, told your friends, told your family, got behind this and said, don't let this happen, because this is one of those, it takes an army or village or whatever you want to say kind of moment to get this pulled. So huge win. Yeah. But it's like I think you said, Nephi, not done. It's like, it's the first phase of the war, right?
Yeah,
like the
halftime.
First battle's done.
It's
or
literally
halftime. We're picking a game. Yeah,
it's halftime, and here's why. So this process, and it's impressive that this, that we've gotten through the House, in this fashion, like that they were able to keep this whole, the great big bill, as they call it, or something like that, that they're able to keep all that generally together and move it through. But recall that it still has to go over to the Senate, and there will be amendments and there are changes in the Senate. And you have people who feel very strongly about this issue in the Senate as well, maybe on the other side of the coin. And so depending on what happens in the Senate, then of course the final process, right, is you're going to have to do this in the House, do it in the Senate. They're not going to be the same. And so whatever the Senate passes has to go back to the House for another bite at the apple again. So this is not over. So if you think this is, don't make the mistake of thinking, that you're, don't go on vacation yet. It doesn't mean you need to, lose your mind. I mean, it is a big win, but just realize until it's signed, it's not done. And that's something to remember.
No, that's right. And so you say it goes to the Senate. The Senate's going to do their own thing. They're going to have, every committee's going to have their own bill, just the way the House did it. Every committee in the Senate's going to have their own bill that's a piece of the overall reconciliation bill. They're going to have their own priorities. I'm sure the Senate and House are communicating some, but it's going to be its own process with its own things. And it is possible that there will be somebody on the Senate side that tries to do something similar, that tries to introduce something that calls for the sell-off or exchange, sale, dispose, call it whatever you want, of public lands. And we're going to have to do the same thing all over again and activate everybody and hope that this is pulled. I'm hoping that the message that was sent by having it stripped from the House is that, Senate, if you put this in, there's no reconciling with the House. Like this language isn't staying in. Don't waste your time. But you never know. And so I think it's just as important today as it was yesterday to be doing the outreach to your senators right now.
Yeah, and I think
saying this is an important thing. Do not put this in. Do not consider land sales as part of your piece of this reconciliation bill.
I think we're going to see those same two western states as ground zero. I think it's going to be Utah and Montana as ground zero. So I think you're going to have...
You mean Utah and Nevada?
I'm in Montana. And I say ground zero not as the locations are going to transfer. I'm talking about the advocates.
Oh, yeah.
Advocacy on either side. I think you're going to see Daines in Montana. My personal opinion is going to be very strongly pro preservation of the public lands and everything like that. And then I don't see any reason why the good senator from Utah wouldn't continue to take the same, and I say that, that's what we say, and, when you're around people, it's so, but that I don't see them changing their philosophical positions. And so the question will be how those positions manifest themselves in the process.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. It's something in the good senator from Utah. You're talking about Senator Mike Lee and being the chair of the Senate ENR committee, Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And he's been, look, I'm not saying anything that he hasn't said. Like, he's said he wants to see the federal estate reduced in size significantly, and that he thinks lands should be transferred to the states, for example, or sold. And he's talked about it as a game of attrition, that he just has to, wait this out. That's his approach, and that's fine. That's his approach. That's what he believes. It just means that for those that want to make sure public lands stay in public hands, that's that old saying. It's going to require diligence. So it's like, take a victory lap for the House, but then stretch and warm up because you got another race to run.
Yeah, drink some Gatorade. Have a power bar. And sharpen your knives.
Hey, it's worth mentioning that there were other parts of that reconciliation bill in the House that were stripped. That started out in there and that were also taken. Everybody's focusing on the public lands piece, and rightfully so. But there was a proposal for this Ambler Road project in Alaska, which would be a haul road out to a prospective mine site And it's been a controversial project for a number of years now, but there's been a push to get this road built in an area that really has no roads at all. And so it would be, I think on the south end of the Brooks Range, long haul road. And it's been without going into a lot of details, been very, very controversial, but it was put into the bill originally as approving the construction of that road. And that piece was stripped from this bill as well. There are still provisions in it, right, that hunters and anglers may care about, may want to know about. But, you might recall that there was a moratorium placed on mining, like a mineral withdrawal outside of the Boundary Waters area in Minnesota. There have been significant concerns there for a lot of years about potential impacts on the Boundary Waters and the water resources there by building a mine adjacent to it. And so I think it was the Biden administration put in place a 20-year moratorium or mineral withdrawal on being able to mine in the Boundary Waters area, or not in the Boundary Waters, but adjacent to the Boundary Waters. And there was a provision in here in this reconciliation bill that strips that moratorium that would authorize then mining there. That's still in there. And I know that there are a number of organizations that care deeply about that issue and are monitoring that closely. That'll be a point of discussion on the Senate side, I'm sure.
On a positive side, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to mention one more thing, and then you can switch to the positive side. So one other piece in there that's still in there is expanded oil and gas exploration in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which has been something that's been very controversial. I believe the state of Alaska has actually supported it for a while. This goes back some long ways, and about like what were the original commitments around creating that National Wildlife Refuge in the first place. But there are also a lot of people, including those that have hunted in ANWR, that say, no, like this is a place that we probably shouldn't have any oil and gas exploration. And so it's created a tension point. In 2017, in the first Trump administration, the tax act that was passed then included a provision to require lease sales in ANWR as a way to help pay for the tax cuts. Those lease sales, for a host of reasons, never materialized. They didn't generate revenue. They're embroiled in litigation, all kinds of stuff. That's been, and then I think the Biden administration went through, they tried to figure out ways to limit the number of acres that were potentially leased, and then you had insurance companies that were refusing to insure and banks that were refusing to finance any companies that wanted to bid or develop there. And so really it got no traction, and there wasn't any development or leasing to speak of there. This bill includes a provision to expand the acreage that would be open for leasing and mandate additional lease sales there. And that's still in there. And I think it's to the tune of, they say it'll generate roughly $1 billion to offset some of the tax cuts. So questionable whether it would generate that money. But
it's very interesting, this math stuff, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of squishy math
there's a lot
process.
of squishy math getting rolled around right now, as we talked about.
And that's how you wind up with big budget deficits. I'm just saying.
Well, things happen. Math is hard. There's a reason that some people are lawyers, Dave.
Because we're not good at math. I hear you.
Because engineering's hard.
So tell me, you said there was another piece of good news.
I'm not saying that any of that is good news or bad news, just so we're, of course, because we're objective. But another piece that's moving through, for those of you who, use suppressors in the hunting space, and everybody should, because it makes a ton of sense. And if you haven't, then time to get one. But the Hearing Protection Act. So the Hearing Protection Act has been around for a while and hasn't necessarily gotten as much traction as maybe it should have. And we're not weighing in whether or not that's, this is not a thumbs up or thumbs down any of this discussion. But that act, a portion of that act came through in the House. And so the Section 2 of that act, which was removing suppressors from the National Firearms Act list, that's on it within that package that passed, as well as a related provision. So what that would do is would make it so that that's a non that it's no longer an NFA item, so you wouldn't need to go through the process and the waiting period to get a tax stamp to get a suppressor. And then without going into too much detail on that, it's only Section 2 of that act. So those of you who are really good at policy and want to kind of read what the other sections do, you can go ahead and look at that, the HPA. But also, there's another provision. They also made it through, so this is kind of a belt and suspenders approach. It removes the cost of that tax stamp. Should suppressors remain on the NFA, it would be essentially like doing your taxes, but you don't have, you have no income taxes to pay, so you don't pay it. It would be the same type of process where you would not have to pay a fee for the approval process for owning a suppressor. So right now that's a $200 tax stamp. It would be zero. And so don't know, again, we've got a whole nother house. This is not business advice. It's not personal advice, but you do have, some stuff moving in that space. And I don't know, Dave, have you, when was the last time you bought a suppressor?
I was waiting for you to say that. As somebody, I feel like you are giving personal and business advice.
Just to you.
I do not have a suppressor. I have solid ear protection, I guess, but I do not have a suppressor.
So that process has gotten much faster over the last couple of years. So the current turnaround time for somebody that is purchasing a suppressor is now, it can be on an individual's. I've heard literally I've had people tell me next day, and a lot of people it's 2, 3, 4 days, and on a trust it's a couple weeks.
Remember when we first started this podcast and it was like 18 months?
Yeah, it was a lot. And to their credit, ATF has done a lot with resources that they had to be able to fast track that. And so I do think that that's something worth keeping an eye on. Also, people forget that, it's, as we look at, efficiencies in government and who we're going to move and take money away from. Sometimes if you take money away from certain departments, it can actually slow things down that you like, as well as things that you don't like. And so that's just something to keep an eye on as this moves forward also. And it affects hunters. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you say that it might mean that there's a $0 instead of $200 tax stamp for a guy like me, that could be the thing that
pushes you over the
edge.
The
market. Yeah. Might put me in the market.
Well,
yeah.
Yep. It's interesting. And again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but you also have this weird thing that happens where people they make decisions based on what they think might happen. And that, again, we're not giving anybody advice because, whether people wait or don't wait, there are ramifications to both. And we don't know how this is going to turn out yet. And so I'm not telling you to, make life choices based on what we're sharing. We're just giving you an update on what's going on.
You are telling people to make their life choices based on what you're
I'm
sharing
not.
right there. You're like, go out and buy a suppressor.
You should. Everyone should.
See, you're telling them to make their life choices. Yeah. That's what I hear.
I'm going to.
You have a place. You have a place to put another one?
You can't have too many suppressors, Dave.
You just swap them out? I mean,
do you want to know how many suppressors I have now, Dave?
That's what I'm getting at. I want to know how many suppressors you've got right now.
I believe I have 10. And I think I'm about to get 3 more.
Yeah, all right. I'm just saying.
Do you
you're a
want an
believer.
explanation of why? I mean, I could give it to you.
Oh no, you can. I'm like, yeah, like
mean-
you're a guy that knows what he wants, and you.
What
go get
kind
it.
of savage wouldn't have a suppressor on a gun? I mean, like, come on, Dave. What are we doing here? You're rude to hunter. Like, you got to think about the hikers that you're around. You know, like, think about your children's ears. See, like, what other there, and besides which they're cool. So there you go. Yeah,
You know
and
my
if you'd
issue.
like me to endorse any of them, I'm happy to. The latest member of the family is actually it's a meat eater suppressor. So there you go.
All right, so you got a bunch.
Yeah, thank you guys at Meat Eater for designing good stuff, and because here's the thing, like, I like to support my friends too when they do cool stuff, and so I'm very excited that they're doing that. And so, you know, what a great product.
Oh, there you go. And you're not even getting paid to say that.
I'm not, but I should.
That's the one thing you can know about this podcast. Like, if we endorse something at all, we're not paid to endorse anything. It's like, yeah, we just kind of like it. That's why we say something nice about it.
Yep, it's crazy. Like, see, here's the problem is now I want to talk about this is about me. I'm a geek about gear. This podcast is about to be 3 hours long, and we're just going to talk nothing about nothing but the advances in technology with regards to suppressors. Ready? Let's go.
Oh no, we don't like if you. And I'm not going to let you open that Pandora's box right now because we don't have 3 hours to do that.
No, we don't. But reconciliation's exciting.
It is. I am going to do a quick reminder. I know I said it once before. I'm going to say it again to close this thing out, which is remember, and I'm going to use, well, I think you said it the right way. Remember, it's halftime. So catch your breath, go to the bathroom, refill your drink, like whatever you need to do, stretch a little bit, but get ready to go back in the game because this isn't done. And start doing your outreach to your senators now. If you live in Montana, thank your representatives in Montana. Live in Idaho, thank Representative Simpson in Idaho. Like, give the thank yous where the thank yous are deserved for those that helped pull this out of the bill. And I know what people are thinking, like, well, how come you've only been talking about Republicans? Well, because in this reconciliation process, it's a party line thing. Like, there's not going to be a Democrat that votes in support of this bill. Just like when Democrats controlled the House and the Senate, there wasn't going to be a Republican that voted in support of the Inflation Reduction Act, right? This stuff was going to be done on party line. This is going to be done on party line. So while it's great that there are a bunch of Democrats out there that oppose public land sales, and they do, and there are some great champions out there. Representative Vasquez in New Mexico is a great example. Senator Heinrich in New Mexico is a great example. Big public lands champions, right? And they deserve their props and their thanks too. This is a partisan process, this reconciliation process.
Which is why, if you're making comments and trying to influence people's positions on this, it's a really bad idea to start your commentary out with Republicans are dumb. Don't do that, please. Don't do that.
Right. Because in this instance, to have this pulled, the only way it was going to get pulled is to have Republicans say pull it, and to have them cash in political chips to do it. And don't, like, no bones about this. There are political chips that had to be cashed in to get this pulled.
Yep.
Right. Like that had to happen. Like Representative Zinke's drawing this red line, there's a cost to that.
Yeah, a cost for him because there's something that he cares about in the future that he's going to be trying to pass, and he's going to have made somebody's going to remember this and be like, yeah, you remember what you did I wanted this I wanted to sell off public lands and you wouldn't. Well, now, I mean, this is, again, you only have there's only so much political capital in your wallet, and this was a serious burn of political capital by Zinke. Yep.
So again, awesome thing that he did there, to draw that line in the sand and bring others along with him to get this thing pulled. So just make sure you're doing. I always think it's good. Remember this, Nephi, when we were quick to get phone calls when people disagreed with things that we did when we worked in the governor's office. But we didn't, there weren't a lot of people sitting by answering phones to take the thank you calls.
Yeah. Yeah. You never get those, do you?
I'm just saying that because.
Do you remember how many you got thank you calls? I'm just interested. I can think of, there's one specific one I can think of where somebody said thanks for something that after they, called and chewed you out the first time, but it's rare.
Yeah, I think I can think of a couple, but it's not like, we sometimes had to hire people on really controversial things, like a part-time person just to answer the phone on that one issue.
The bad, the negative calls.
Yeah, the negative calls. Yeah. But we never had to hire anybody to say that.
You never had to staff up the thank yous.
Never had to staff up for the thank yous. And I guess my point is, in saying that is okay, you get into this knowing that's how the world works, and people really only reach out to you when they want something from you or need something or want to complain about something. But in this type of instance, I'd say if you called and asked your representative to pull this, and you're in a place where one of those representatives did do that, heck, even if you don't live in Montana or Idaho, for example, it might be worth just picking up the phone or sending a note into those offices just to say thank you.
100%.
Because this is going to be something. This isn't going to be the last time this comes up, and they need to know that the public's got their back on this too. And so I just say that as saying thank you goes a long way. I'd encourage that. So even though we're saying go start reaching out to your senators, get prepared for the second half of the game here, it's worth sending a thank you note for that first half.
There you go.
That's my thought. That's my final thought.
And we wouldn't be here without Your Mountain podcast. So feel free to send Dave a thank you in his email. And my Venmo is...
I will say this. We are approaching our 200th episode of the Your Mountain podcast.
Did you line up our guest for episode 200 yet?
I have not. I've been kind of busy on this reconciliation thing, so have not. But what I was going to say, we're approaching 200. We're also approaching at the same time our 7-year anniversary of this. We've been recording these for 7 years. You know what would be awesome? This is my ask. In lieu of
a
payment.
Sponsor.
That would be. Hey, if anybody wants to sponsor this, send us an email at yourmountain@itsyourmountain.com. But also, what would be awesome is help us get a big push towards this 200th episode. Tell some friends, tell some neighbors, tell some coworkers, tell some
nobody's
whomever.
Yeah, as long as they don't work in the same, as long as don't get us in trouble.
Well, don't get us in trouble, but tell everybody still, and also go out and give us a 5-star. If you haven't done it yet, give us a 5-star rating, write a review, let those algorithms work. But just get a big push, share this stuff, get people downloading, do the thing we can't do, use your social media to promote this podcast, because we're just old fuddy-duddies at this point that apparently have no idea how to use social media or have just checked out and stopped doing it.
What we should really look into is AI. If we could get AI to be to do our podcast for us, in our voice.
It'd probably be better.
I'm going to look into it.
All right.
See what Grok can do for us.
There you go. I'm gonna end this. I don't want us to get down this path. Do you have any last thoughts?
I don't think so. But it's I do want to go back. We're nearing the 200th episode, and I'm depending on you, Dave. You got to deliver. You know the guest I want.
Man, I do. I know the guest you want.
Now, I'm going to remind you, this is just like the Wildcatter suite. Like, you know, it's like you either, like, you're in a better position to deliver this because of your infinite, because of your web of entanglement that you have. But if you don't get it done, Dave, I'm going to have to do it. And then I'll have to tell everybody I did it.
I hear you. I hear you. All right, I'm going to end it right there. I don't want to go down this path of just taking verbal abuse from you for the rest of this thing. Send us a note, yourmountain@itsyourmountain.com. Tell us what you think. Tell us your thoughts. Share some ideas. We've got a couple podcasts brewing that are directly related to ideas that have come in through email. So even if we don't take one periodically, we do get a lot of show ideas from folks that reach out and send us emails. So do it. And thanks for listening. Thanks, lastly, for all you all did to help get this stuff pulled out of the reconciliation bill.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
I just want you to know, in all seriousness, how much I appreciate you as a friend and co-host. And it's we're not at 200 yet, but it really is it's really a pleasure to work with you.
I couldn't agree more. The feeling's mutual. So, yeah. Thanks for continuing to do this, and for the folks that we did get a bunch of emails actually from folks saying, I hope this isn't your last episode. When Nephi, you said this is our last episode.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's not. We're not done yet. Not done yet.
Now, if this pod track P4 breaks, we're really in trouble. We're real in trouble. If your microphone, quits working, we're really in trouble because we don't have backup gear and we don't know how any other new stuff works. So we figured this out. So if this goes bad, then all bets are off. But as long as this keeps working, we just plug it in and go. Like, hey, man,
we'll keep doing it.
Might as well. As long as the record button works.
I'm going to go do some other stuff.
Dave,
and
thank you.
But it's been a pleasure, and we'll talk soon. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And as always, remember that life is about experiences, so go have one.